Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is Angie Barker Jackson, and I'm the Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at Berkeley School of Theology. We are so delighted you have joined today's First Friday Lunch and Learn for May 2025. Please introduce yourself in the chat if you can. Let us know where you are in this beautiful world. And if it's time for a meal or a snack during this hour, feel free to partake of that. Just keep yourself muted, if you will. This series is sponsored and planned by the Alumni Engagement Office, and Ms. Melissa LaBeouf, Assistant Director of Alumni and Donor Engagement, is co-hosting with me today, as usual. She'll be monitoring the chat, so if things that our special guest shares today prompt questions or surface things that you would like to share or dialogue about, be sure to drop your questions in the chat. And at the end of her presentation, we'll take some time for Q&A. Also, just a reminder, Melissa is your source of information for all of these First Friday events, as well as events in the alumni department. These lunch and learns have been designed with three purposes in mind: learning, connecting, and being. Each month, we feature a different topic and a new guest. And our hope is that the topics will stretch and challenge our minds, that will connect and reconnect with others in the BST family, and that this will be a space of radical belonging. Today's special guest is Reverend Michele Turek. Reverend Turek is National Coordinator for Asian Ministries at American Baptist Home Mission Society, or ABHMS. Asian Ministries is a mission program of ABHMS and American Baptist Churches USA. At present, more than 130 Asian American Baptist churches, congregations, and fellowship groups exist within American Baptist Churches USA, with another 300 in various Burma diaspora churches. These groups are comprised of immigrant generation Asian Americans and their descendants, which include Japanese, Filipino, Chinese, Korean, Indian, Burmese, Chin, Karen, Kachin, Min, Vietnamese, Thai, Laotian, Indonesian, and Cambodian groups. More than 28 different languages and dialects are spoken, which makes Asian Ministries one of the most culturally rich and ethnically diverse groups within the American Baptist faith family. Reverend Turek has the big job of strengthening Asian ministries and mission while responding to ABHMS mission goals by providing all of these things: pastoral and lay leadership development, church planting and transformation, evangelism and discipleship, recruitment and placement of professional leaders, resource development, scholarships, sensitization for Asian American concerns, bridge building and networking among language groups, interaction and cultivation of relationships with intercultural ministries, support for Asian women in ministry, and partnership with the Alliance of Asian American Baptist Churches. Wow, Michele, I don't know when you sleep. We are delighted today to welcome and hear from Reverend Michele Turek about the relationship between one's culture and faith. Welcome, Michele.
Thank you, Angie. I suppose it is all true, but when you list it all like that, it's pretty, it sounds very overwhelming.
No pressure.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, BST community, for allowing me to come today. I am technically an alumni because I took my Baptist polity course back when the school was called ABSW. So you can still claim me as an alum, and I will join that happily. So thank you so much for the invitation to share with you today about my work, but this is just, it's kind of more than that. It's more It's also it's my life, it's my community, it's my heart. So really grateful for the opportunity to share with you all today, especially as we enter into May, API Heritage Month. As I understand it, is it also the second anniversary of the Lunch and Learn? I think that they told me that early on. Maybe so. Angie's kind of nodding. That's great. Okay. Well, without further ado, I'm just gonna introduce Angie did such a great job of kind of summarizing the broad work that I do. For those who are maybe not be as familiar with American Baptist Home Mission Societies, that's where Asian Ministries resides in. Um, ABHMS, this is our wonderful staff. It's slightly outdated because we have a lot of transition going on, a lot of new staff. But ABHMS promotes the Christian faith across the United States and Puerto Rico by cultivating Christ-centered leaders and disciples who heal and transform communities in partnership with American Baptists and others. So it's really thinking about what a mission society looks like, right, in 2025. And it has been such a joy to be a part of this work and privilege. If you want to learn about the very many things that Angie mentioned that the broad work of ABHMS is, you're welcome to visit the website or scan the QR code to discover more. Well, specifically for Asian ministries, you can really narrow all of those things that Angie mentioned into kind of like these four foci. Um, One is collaboration. Yes, I enjoy being a bridge builder. I love collaborating with others from the American Baptist family and beyond. But yeah, just being able to work with ministry leaders to make kingdom work happen. So it's really, really exciting. Something that I really am proud of is that ABHMS in a lot of Asian American Christian circles, many of the key players are um, centers that have been created and have been cultivated specifically for AAPI or Asian American specific work. But ABHMS has a lot of other things going on, so I'm just really grateful that that the work of ABHMS it's a voice that is carries broader work but cares about Asian American ministries. Um, Also, we talk about advocacy, knowing and elevating the concerns of the API community and responding as we can. Sometimes it also means framing justice as a missional concern, because sometimes our churches may not necessarily understand uh, justice through service as an expression of faith, right? So thinking about those types of things. Equipping, as she said as well, resources through training and as well as other outside external partners such as BST's very own ARC initiative. And then of course, connecting, not just networking for myself, but creating larger networks for our ministry leaders so that they don't feel like they're alone and they can learn from one another. So very broad brushstrokes. Um, and as Angie mentioned too, you know, we have such an incredible diversity within the Asian diaspora in and of itself. Diversity means diversity of needs and nuances that inform and shape our churches. So that leads me to introduce just a couple of like the projects that we have going on. I'll touch on these really, really briefly. Is the exchange, where we're creating spaces for people to learn from one another. Within the Asian diaspora, it is very common for people to kind of stay within their own ethnic groups. You know, if you're uh, Chinese American, you probably stay with Chinese American. If you're first, second gen Korean, you're in the Korean church. You know, a lot of our Burma diaspora ethnic groups, they kind of stay in their own, with their own communities. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, of course, as there usually is. But by and large, this is still the majority case. So the exchange is designed for people to actually be able to broaden that network, to hear from each other's stories, to share our stories. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Specifically, this is a Philadelphia-based event, but it is hybrid, so if you're welcome to join in if you can on June 6th and 7th. This is an event specifically focused on the South Asian American experience, which is very rare. I feel like, unfortunately, when we think about Asian American, most people tend to focus on East Asian experience, right? But there's so much more, so many other corners of Asia to explore. So in this way, we're focusing on the South Asian experience. This is a larger project that is with a few other partners, such as the Asian Center at Princeton Theological Seminary, down at Fuller as well, down with Epic Movement, with Crew. So there's a lot of Asian American Christian players kind of coming together because we recognize that these stories are not known to the wider community, let alone within our own diaspora community. So that's one that I would love to invite you for. The other one is in the Bay Area, right in your backyard, in August 1st through 2nd. It's actually going to be, the second day is held at BST. So there's, yeah, definitely be on the look for those things. And lastly, one of the important things of my work that I really value is being able to connect with people on the hands and feet ground level of ministry and to listen to their concerns and the challenges that they're facing. And so many times, we hear about, youth ministry, our young people. How are we preparing them, the next generation of leaders, but also just in their faith formation in general? So the Catalyst cohort was created last year for this age group, 18 to 35. We started the year off with 8. It went down to 7, but we started down with 8. And of that 8, we had 7 different ethnic and cultural backgrounds represented from around the country. And even then, the 2 that were of the same ethnic group were had different experiences. Like one came as a refugee, and the other is a second generation born here. So even in that, even if they're in the same ethnic group, there is difference. So the Catalyst is meant for being able to, for these young people to actually have the space to birth something out of themselves. So many times, this is probably true for other cultural groups as well, but there are some cultural nuances that make it very difficult for young people to exercise leadership, or there's always the respect for elders and the authority of elders, right? So oftentimes any sort of youth ministry effort is kind of dictated from the older generation and given to the younger folks, and kind of saying, here, you can play in the sandbox. We invite you to fill these roles, maybe help with sound or social media or set up tables and chairs. I think that we're kind of familiar with those roles. But as we give space for the young people and young leaders to exercise the gifts that God has given them, we are giving them so much, even that, just so much growth and just the ability to say and decide and try to do these things, right? So that's something that I've been really excited about. So this is the breadth of my work, and more specifically, I'm going to kind of pin down this conversation of culture and faith. Now, there are many things that can be included in culture, right? We think of like generation, Gen Z, millennial, Gen X, boomers, Gen Xers. Aren't you glad I didn't forget you? Um, um, but yeah, so there are so many different things, right? That inform who we are and how we view the world. And um, there's also geography, right? Very different from Bay Area to SoCal. The culture is going to be different to the Midwest, to New York. There's also socioeconomic culture. Uh, so there's a lot of different layers, right? But for the sake of our discussion today, I'm specifically referring to, the shared practices stemming from similar nation of origin, ethnic group, and or race. Now, okay, I'm going to switch over to my Mentimeter. If you haven't used Mentimeter before, um, you can go to menti.com. I'm assuming you're on your browser, or you can even pull it up on your phone. If you're a little bit more not as tech savvy, I guess, you could feel free to just type it in the chat. But I would love for us to kind of just think about, really take a moment uh, to write in and name 3 to 5 things that are very important to your own ethnic cultural community. Um, you can say things like maybe your community really values family or family time or food, eating together. Um, maybe they really value education. So I would love to hear from you all. Again, you can either go to menti.com and submit your answers that way. You could just plug in the number that's at the top there, or you can put it in the chat too, if you would prefer that. I'll just give a couple minutes. It's people after my own heart, putting rice in there as a significant thing in your community. Love that. Food and community are kind of rising to the top here, which I love. I didn't want to shout out, put Lauren on the spot, but we did know it was you.
We all knew who it was. We all knew who it was.
That's awesome. Well, this is great. I love that family, food, community. Those are pretty common things in our communities. It's really interesting, isn't it, to see the ways that we're similar and also different. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Feel free to keep inserting things too if you would like. But yeah, culture is organic, right? We receive all these things. We know that this is important to our communities because we've been shaped by them, and our community has told us in one shape or form, probably not directly, but we learn it as we go through life, right? Um, And the thing about culture is that it can change, right? It can change with migration, it can be molded by what's going on in the world and society at the time. So, for example, here's some of my observations on cultural identity here in the United States when it comes to patterns of, in particular, 2 groups of the Asian diaspora. Again, these are going to be very broad brushstrokes. Um, and generalizations. So, of course, these are things that I'm going to bring out and see that as a common thread, but I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, right? So I'm a 4th, 5th generation Chinese American. So my family started coming over in the mid 1800s. Um, and on the other hand, we're going to look at the first, second generation people coming from Burma within the Burma diaspora. Now, of course, there are many different ethnic groups of the Burma diaspora, but just generalizing here. And then we're going to look at three different, I guess, factors. So there's the reason for migration, mindset, and then the succeeding generations, how they deal with the second, third generation after that comes after them. So just a few things. Reason for migration. So for my family, and then a lot of them that came at the same time, right? The motivation or the reason for migration was it's self-motivated. I'm going to decide to come. Um, on the West Coast, as I understand it, was very focused on we're here, we're gonna work hard and send funds home. And once I make a ton of money, I'm gonna go and move back. Move back to China, and my family will be well taken care of and live well. On the East Coast, we're the more scholars, so you have people who are pursuing more opportunity for education and work. But overarching, this is the pursuit of what the understanding of what the American dream was, right? So whatever that looked like to them, that's what they were pursuing at the time. For first, second gen Burma diaspora, right? The reason for migration is very different. It's for safety, it's for self-preservation, avoiding the military junta, right? Right now, well, the Civil War has been going on for a long time, but the current military coup, which has been going on now for, I think, is it 4 years now? Um, they're actually they're fleeing violence, they're fleeing persecution for their faith. They're coming for a hope for a better future, but in the circumstances of more of a more tragic world happenings, right? The mindset, right, for the historic Chinese group, you're keeping your head down. You're going to work hard to be successful and don't make trouble. You don't want to stir the pot because otherwise that draws attention to you, and you don't want to be like, the naughty kid in class. The mindset was you're an American now, so be American. My grandparents knew Cantonese, but they never taught my parents because at that time, assimilation was the goal. The the understanding was, yeah, you're here in America now, so you learn English. You have no need to learn Chinese. So there were a lot of that was again the mindset at the time. You make your family proud and you pursue success. Um, for the Burma group, for the many who come as refugees, there are some that have come as immigrants, but the majority who have come as refugees, many would rather not have even left their home. They did not choose to come. Um, in fact, there's a desire by many to even return someday, that as we pray for peace in Myanmar, that when that day comes, they would be able to go back. They would be able to help rebuild it into the country that they hope for it to be. And of course, they remain heavily invested in home. Many of our churches within the Burma diaspora, I mean, if you think of even the recent earthquake that happened in Myanmar last month, um, it's not uncommon for churches, they're going to get together, they're going to fundraise, and they're going to find a way to get it back home as quickly as possible, to help their families and their friends that are back in their community. So the connection to homeland and home culture looks very different, right, from these two groups. And then lastly, looking at the succeeding generations, right, for the Chinese, again, my family's experience, the assimilation is the goal, and your measure of success is to blend in with the majority culture. Um, And because of that, right, there's a lot of loss of certain cultural things, certain things that you would celebrate, or um, we try to eat what the majority culture eats, or again, just speaking English and not having an accent and things like that. Um, I mentioned earlier about the leadership issues, right? So a lot of the first, second generation historic Chinese churches had a lot of trouble navigating what it meant to be a first generation, still have a very heavily Chinese mindset of how to do things and how to lead, and their understanding of faith. Second generation, who grew up in America, who had a more Western perspective and worldview, who spoke only English or maybe majority English. Um, and they had different ideas and different ways of leading and their understanding of what church life should look like. So many of those churches, that's where a lot of those splits came from those historic churches. Versus if you fast forward to now, um, for the Burma diaspora, this is something that they are currently facing right now because their children are starting to lose their language. And they're starting to, grow up here in America. They spent enough time here now that they're starting to identify more with Western ideology. Um, so there are some significant efforts to the preservation of language. There's an intentionality of passing on significant history or cultural things like dance or dress or like weaving patterns and things like that. So again, very, very different because of the way that the culture is for each one and the circumstances in which they're coming into the United States. Um, but at the heart of it, there are things that are in common, right? There are still um, matters of loss. There's even if you did choose to come, you still lose your family, your home, what is familiar. Um, for the refugee experience, there's this painful loss of being like I can't do anything about this terrible situation that I have to run from. And and now with my children losing these different rich parts of our heritage, there is, yeah, just a really heartbreaking loss there. Um, but yeah, every one of them still had to deal with new land, new food, new systems to navigate, like taxes or how to sign up your kids for school and all these other things. Speaking different language. Yeah, so there are some commonalities in the experience and yet very different things too. Um, I'm going to share very briefly before we go into some breakout rooms for a little bit. Um, I want to share with you this epiphany that I had when I was in college. I just kind of had this realization that God made me Chinese American. I could have been born any other point in history throughout humanity. I could have been born in a different country. I could have been born to a different family and been a different ethnic group, right? So if we believe in an intentional creator that that knits us together in our mother's womb, then we have to see and understand that our ethnic and cultural identity is a part of that. It's a part of who we are and who God intended us to be. Now, like I said, we're going to go into some breakouts for just like a few minutes, like 8 minutes, I think, if we have time. I think we have time. And we have two questions that I would love for you all to discuss, and I'll also put it in the chat here. Um, think about the role that your own cultural identity plays in who you are as a person? To what extent does that intermingle with your identity in Christ? And a second question, what is something from your culture that adds to the richness of God's family? Now, we all have something beautiful and unique that has been a part of our upbringing, a part of our heritage, a part of how we have been formed throughout our lifetime. So what are some of those things that are actually they are seen as being added to the beauty of the body, right? I hope you had and trust you had great conversations. I know we lost some folks in the transition, but that's okay. Um, yeah, I would love to hear just like a couple of takeaways that anybody might have had. Autumn, I know that you were starting to share. I would love to hear you finish out that thought.
Sure. I'm Black American, born and raised here. And I was describing one of the earliest experiences where I really considered the interplay of like culture with my faith. And that was I have a European American like best friend I met in undergrad, and we were comparing music and worship. And I have a very specific kind of gospel sound that I grew up with that I'm very used to that she was not. And we were comparing the themes of our music. Like I was saying, my music is that we sing in church tends to be surrounding the idea of our faith filling needs and the Lord like filling in gaps of poverty and things like that. And I remember asking her like, "Hey, what song do you guys sing when you like have bills to pay but you can't pay them? Like, what's your what's your go-to song?" She's like, "We don't really have playlists like that." And so that was one of the first moments where I really considered how much culture plays into faith expression. And we've been just comparing experiences ever since. It's one of my favorite things.
Wow, that's incredible, Autumn. I love that. That's a wonderful reflection on how culture informs worship, even. That's awesome. Anybody else want to share? Going once, going twice.
I'll,
Uh,
I'll, I'll share one thing that's different. Sorry. Oh, hey, Bill.
no, you go
Yeah,
ahead.
Bill and Sam and I were in a group. It's actually not about something the three of us talked about, and maybe Bill can share about that, but just building on what Autumn was saying. Uh, the other day, I brought my son into, so I've only ever gone to one Asian church, and that is First Chinese Baptist Church in San Francisco, Chinatown. And so while I'm not a member there anymore, I still go back often to visit. And I brought my son with me, and he was, for him, who has grown up in multicultural, multiracial churches for the most time, and now is at a predominantly white church. It was a really interesting experience for him. And we were at service. Then he went to youth group, and then as we were walking through Chinatown, because the church, for those of you who know, is right nestled in Chinatown. And as we're walking around, going to the Chinese bakery to get all my favorite things made with rice, he said, "Mom," he was holding my hand, and he's 14 years old, but we still hold hands. He said, he's like, "I feel really at home here." He said, "As I'm looking around, everybody is like an auntie and an uncle." And I said to him, "Whenever you want to come back, we can come. You have many churches that you count as home and as family, and we can come back anytime." So what Autumn was sharing just kind of reminded me that that's an experience that I hope to expose my kids to more often, because there is a lot of it enriches, both your worship and ecclesial life, as well as your own ethnic identity and cultural identity.
Hmm. Beautiful, Lauren. Thank you. Tearing up a bit. Bill, did you have something that you wanted to share?
Well, I think that, I think all three of us in our group were very happy that we are in California because we have so many opportunities to be multicultural. And it's just a real blessing.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely so. Thank you. Well, I appreciate everybody for taking part in that reflection, and by all means, don't let it stop here. yeah, let it be a continuous journey for you all. In closing, I just have a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you before we end our time. A part of what we've been doing in the Catalyst cohort that I was sharing about earlier is digging into our family's histories, you know, the good, the bad.
Oh.
I got muted, sorry. But yeah, so we're discovering these rich histories, right? And seeing the hands that God of God on that along the journey, right? Now, within the broader Asian American Christian community, the topic of storytelling is a hot topic right now. It's very trendy. Not just in the way of how one tells a story, you know, being a good storyteller, but how one reflects on their story, right, as both the individual and the collective. And how do we amplify those stories so that others can hear it too? Now, again, some of these historic stories are not necessarily shared outside the community, you know, external to the Asian diaspora. Probably not a lot of stories, and even in our history books that are here in the US, don't touch on some of these significant occurrences for our community, and oftentimes inside their community too, right? We don't know our own histories, or the histories of like for me, I'm thinking even the Korean experience, the Vietnamese experience, and all those other things. These are all things that I need to learn more about. This is something that God often told Israel, right, through the prophets. You know, remember all that the Lord your God has done for you. And of course, we often think of this in reference to the deliverance of the Israelites from slavery from Egypt, right, with pillars of cloud and fire. But I invite us to think, well, what about of our own stories? What of God's faithfulness in our journeys and the sacred act of remembering? So it's really common for Asian Americans to feel like they don't belong, fueled by societal plagues like perpetual foreigner myth, right? I don't belong here because I don't fit into a certain box of what it means to be an American. But for me, I also don't belong in China either. I've never been to China. I don't speak Chinese. They'd probably know right away that I was an American. And there's this really beautiful quote that I saw in an Asian American Christian Collaborative article recently that I wanted to share with you all because I thought it was so powerful, by Heidi Kwan. And she says, perhaps being Asian American was not a watered down version of Asian or a less than version of American. Perhaps being Asian American meant being woven into a rich history of Asian Americans who dug in with courage and forged a path and a whole new identity that could hold space for cultural complexities to exist. Now, to me, this really is so powerful because it's like it gives me permission to say, it's okay that I don't fit in this box or that box. This is a new path as an Asian American that we are inheriting and building at the same time. So each of us has a unique heritage, right, that has been poured into you, with all of its triumphs and traumas, accomplishments and anguish, celebrations and shortfalls, right? The ethnic and cultural identities that are built into our very bones and runs through our veins are not a part of us in opposition to or despite our cultural or our identity in Christ. We often talk about bringing our whole selves to God, right? Living sacrifices, our schedules, our time, our gifts. We talk about stewardship. So how are you being a steward of those cultural pieces of yourself? After all, it's entwined in who we are, right? How we see the world, how we understand life and living. It is a major part of who we are. and recognizing and owning that is truly bringing our whole selves to God. So that's all I have for you today. I hope that this was a good and helpful reflection for everyone. I think that we have some time. Do we have time for question? Oh, no. Okay, I don't think so.
There, I will want to share, Michelle, that Dr. Brenneman left a comment in the chat. There's not questions, but I think he echoes at least my heart. This was an excellent presentation. We loved the stunning visuals, which reflected beautiful Asian aesthetics. And he says, you know, it reminds us of the beauty of our many cultural differences. So I echo his remarks and just thank you really for holding space for us to reflect together and for also teaching us some things that we didn't know before we came into this space together today. So it was a lovely combination of learning and reflecting and being community. So thank you for that gift that you've given to us today.
Thank you. It was my absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Well,
Thank you.
We're so glad you joined us. Yes, on this, our second birthday as a First Friday Lunch and Learn program. I told Michelle during the breakout room time that I had been all ready for this and getting ready ahead of time last month. And then this morning I was so busy, I forgot. So I was glad for the reminder that it's our birthday, and we are grateful to have had wonderful guests like Michelle over the last 2 years as we have done this program. Before we log off, there are just a few announcements for the BST community. If you're a BST alum, please make plans to join us in person on May 16th for Hope and Celebration, a gathering of alums and graduates. This is the night before commencement. The evening will include food, time for socializing, and a program to welcome the 2025 grads into the alumni family. Next month's First Friday Lunch and Learn will be unique. That's all I can say about the uniqueness at this point. But it will be a DEI Matters panel discussion with local church pastors about DEI in pastoral practice. So it's going to be a very rich discussion, and we hope that you will join us on Zoom in June. That's Friday, June 6th. And finally, BST is offering 2 summer courses, which are open to auditors. If you'd like to try out a class but aren't looking for a degree program or graduate credit, you can audit the summer term courses for $120 each. I will be teaching What's Money Got to Do with It, a spiritual, biblical, and theological exploration of resources. And Dr. Eric C.S., who was with us for a while today, will be teaching Down the Rabbit Hole, Conspiracy Theories and the Bible. You can reach out to Admissions Director Leah Rochel if you'd like to audit. Thank you again for your participation with us today, Reverend Michelle, as well as everyone else, and we look forward to seeing you in June. Have a great day and a great weekend, everyone.